IDN United on Diaspora Bond on how diaspora can use this opportunity to create beneficial social impacts to our mother country. Each presenter will be given 15 minutes for his presentation, and I will give a signal at the 3 last minutes of the time slot for the presenter to wrap up the presentation. At the end of presentation, Pak Heri Utomo will moderate a 30-minute discussion session. Okay, let's get started. Kami persilakan untuk presentasi pertama kepada yang terhormat Bapak Yusron Ambari. Silakan Pak Yusron.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Yang terhormat, terima kasih Bu Imelda, Pak Heri. Yang terhormat Pak Heri, Presiden Diapo Indonesian Direktur Surat Utang Negara, kemudian Pak J, good morning Pak J, dan yang tentunya seluruh diaspora Indonesia di seluruh dunia. Selamat pagi, selamat sore, selamat malam untuk kita semua. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Puji syukur kita panjatkan kehadirat Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, Tuhan yang Maha Esa, atas berkat nikmatnya kita bisa berkumpul semua secara virtual untuk sama-sama mendengarkan dan mengikuti webinar series yang diselenggarakan oleh IDN United. Salam kenal dari saya Yusron, dipercaya sebagai Direktur Diplomasi Publik di Kemlu dan baru menjabat di awal tahun ini, tapi ya langsung kena COVID, jadi saya belum sempat berkomunikasi lebih banyak dengan bapak-bapak, ibu-ibu diaspora semua. Di tengah pandemi COVID ini, saya juga ingin menyampaikan doa kepada kita semua. Semoga kita diberikan kesehatan dan kekuatan sehingga bisa melalui wabah ini dengan selamat. Amin. Saya juga ingin mengucapkan terima kasih kepada Pak Heri Utomo yang sudah mengundang kami, Kementerian Luar Negeri, untuk ikut serta dalam kegiatan yang penting. Buat saya kegiatan ini menjadi semakin penting karena pertama saya bisa bersilaturahmi dengan Bapak Ibu sekalian di seluruh dunia, dan kedua kebetulan Pak Heru di Kemlu itu di unit saya ada satu unit khusus memang yang mengelola diaspora. Jadi buat saya ini kayak sama aja kayak kayak anggota politik, anggota partai politik yang ketemu konstituen ya Pak. Nah, jadi cocok karena saya nggak hadir diundang oleh Pak Heru untuk berbicara di forum ini. Sangat kebetulan sekali Pak. Mungkin bisa kita mulai slide-nya. Pak, di sini juga saya dibantu oleh kawan-kawan dari Direktorat Diplomasi Publik Pak. Ada Pak Rino, ada Bu Elsa, dan ada beberapa lagi nanti ya. Ya, oke. Ya. Nah, Bapak Ibu yang saya hormati, ini saya akan bicara dulu next slide please. Perlu waktu 5 tahun sejak Kongres Diaspora Indonesia pertama di LA. Ini saya akan bicara mengenai timeline diaspora. Setelah 2012 di Kongres Diaspora Indonesia 1 di LA, kebetulan saya juga hadir Pak Heru. Saya waktu itu bertugas di Washington DC, jadi juga menyaksikan peristiwa bersejarah ini bersama membantu Pak Dino, dan juga ada Pak Rino di sini juga waktu itu beliau bertugas di LA, saya di Washington, dan kami sama membantu Pak Dino untuk suksesan Kongres Diaspora ini. Jadi sejak diluncurkan di 2012 perlu waktu 5 tahun untuk pemerintah akhirnya menerbitkan Peraturan Presiden Nomor 76 Tahun 2017 tentang fasilitas bagi masyarakat Indonesia di luar negeri. Dan di tahun yang sama, Kementerian Luar Negeri bekerja cepat Pak, menerbitkan yang namanya Permenlu Nomor 7 Tahun 2017 tentang penerbitan dan pencabutan Kartu Masyarakat Indonesia di luar negeri. Tadi saya dengar Ibu Imelda agak susah singkatannya KMILN gitu, jadi biar gampang kita sebut Kemilen aja Pak. Jadi enak kedengarannya Pak. Kita sebut Kemilen. Nah,
memang waktu itu sudah dirilis di Global Summit kita di Jakarta waktu IDN United. Kebetulan
Kartu Masyarakat
ya. Kartu Masyarakat Indonesia. Silakan Pak, maaf.
Next slide please. Dan di tahun yang sama, sebelumnya, di tahun yang sama, di tahun 2017 juga, Kementerian Luar Negeri sudah membentuk satu unit eselon 3 di bawah diplomasi publik yang mengelola kartu masyarakat Indonesia di luar negeri. Artinya dalam 1 tahun itu pergerakannya cukup cepat Pak, dari sebelumnya lambat 5 tahun, kemudian dalam waktu 1 tahun kita bisa membuat 2 peraturan perundang-undangan, dan di tahun yang sama juga kita berhasil menerbitkan untuk pertama kalinya Kemilen atas nama Bapak Andri Gunawan yang diajukan oleh KJRI LA. Nah, tahun ini slide saya yang terakhir, yang seminggu yang lalu, pagi ini kami cek Kemilen ada 1044 Kemilen yang sudah diterbitkan dalam kurun waktu dari 2017 sampai 2020. Next slide, please. Nah, kalau menurut saya, Pak, ini kayak siput jalannya, Pak. Lambat banget. Jadi kalau kita lihat dari perkiraan potensi diaspora yang ada, yang katanya diperkirakan mencapai 6 juta, kita baru punya 1044, itu masih kurang dari 0,02%. Maaf, persentase itu baru 0,02%. Jadi ya menurut saya terlalu sedikit kali Pak ya. Next slide please. Saya mencoba mencari jawaban Pak. Kita ngobrol-ngobrol dengan kawan kami di di Kemlu, juga dengan teman-teman diaspora. Nah, saya coba menjawab Pak. Ada 2 kemungkinan jawaban Pak. Ini yang pertama adalah perwakilan RI yang kurang aktif menjangkau diaspora di Indonesia. Ini mohon maaf kalau ada yang dari KBRI Washington DC, ini kebetulan saya ada fotonya yang ini, jadi saya ambil. Saya bukan menuduh KBRI Washington DC, Pak. Ini cuma contoh aja ini. Embassy perwakilan RI yang kurang aktif menjangkau menjangkau para diasporanya di luar negeri, sehingga pergerakan pemilik Kemilen itu sangat lamban sekali. Nah, untuk itu kami sudah dimulai Pak, jadi kita akan terus mengaktifkan perwakilan. Sudah beberapa Bapak Ibu sekalian, sudah beberapa kali kita selalu mengirim telex kepada perwakilan untuk meminta perwakilan lebih aktif lagi menjangkau diaspora untuk meningkatkan partisipasi warga para diaspora untuk mendaftar untuk mendapatkan Kemilen. Kemudian yang kedua, kemungkinan jawaban kedua, next slide. Bapak Ibu diaspora enggan untuk mendaftar. Ada beberapa kali saya berbicara dengan kawan-kawan diaspora, rata-rata sebagian besar pertanyaannya, ngapain sih kita harus double-double mendaftar, ada pelapor diri, ada ini. Kedua, dan yang paling banyak adalah pertanyaan, apa sih manfaat Kemilen? Ngapain saya harus daftar Kemilen kalau nggak ada untungnya buat kita? Itu yang paling banyak jawaban yang nomor 2 itu Pak. Nah, untuk itu kami di Kementerian Luar Negeri terus berusaha mencari insentif, kira-kira insentif apa yang bisa kami berikan kepada para diaspora. Nah, untuk tahap awal, next slide. Nah, ini insentif yang pertama yang kelihatannya baru berhasil dicapai itu adalah diaspora bond yang pertama. Jadi pada di awal tahun ini di Januari 2020, pada saat ada kegiatan pernyataan pers tahunan Menlu di Jakarta, ada penandatanganan kerjasama antara Kementerian Luar Negeri dan Kementerian Keuangan untuk menerbitkan diaspora bond dengan menggunakan syarat Kemilen. Next slide. Nanti mengenai diaspora bond, Pak Denny akan memaparkan lebih jauh lagi mengenai diaspora bond. Nah, itu jualannya Pak Denny. Nah, sekarang jualannya saya itu adalah Kemilen ini, Pak. Jadi saya akan bicara ya sedikit lah, mungkin Bapak Ibu sudah memahami mengenai Kemilen. Saya akan jelaskan sedikit mengenai Kemilen ini. Kemilen adalah adalah kartu tanda pengenal yang diberikan oleh pemerintah Indonesia kepada masyarakat Indonesia di luar negeri yang memenuhi persyaratan dan kriteria tertentu. Next slide. Apa saja fungsi Kemilen? Yang pertama adalah sebagai tanda pengenal Bapak Ibu sebagai diaspora Indonesia. Kedua, alat pemetaan potensi masyarakat Indonesia di luar negeri. Ketiga, alat pemetaan jejaring masyarakat Indonesia di luar negeri. Next slide. Siapa saja yang berhak memiliki Kemilen, yang boleh mendaftar untuk mendapatkan Kemilen? Yang pertama adalah warga negara Indonesia, tentunya mereka yang menetap atau bekerja di luar negeri, Pak. Kemudian yang kedua adalah WNA. Mereka WNA itu yang masuk kategori WNA ex-WNI, WNA anak ex-WNI, WNA yang orang tua kandungnya adalah WNI. Next slide. Berapa lama pembuatan Kemilen? Normalnya Pak, kalau tidak ada masalah, semua Bapak Ibu, semua syarat-syarat lengkap, prosesnya itu makan waktu 3 hari setelah semua pernyataan dinyatakan siap. Next slide. Kemilen itu bersifat sukarela, jadi tidak ada paksaan, tidak ada kewajiban bagi Bapak Ibu untuk membuat Kemilen. Berbeda dengan paspor, berbeda dengan KTP, di mana Bapak Ibu memang harus menikah. Kalau Kemilen bersifat sukarela, mau daftar boleh, kalau enggak kelewatan, katanya gitu Pak. Nah kemudian kalau apa namanya, dia jangka waktunya 2 tahun dan dapat diperpanjang. Kemilen juga di next slide, tidak ada biaya alias gratis. Dia diberikan secara digital elektronik, tidak ada kartu yang dibuat. Kemilen itu akan disampaikan kepada Bapak Ibu melalui email yang Bapak daftarkan. Silakan Bapak mau cetak, Bapak mau tidak cetak dalam bentuk, Bapak Ibu mau tidak cetak dalam bentuk digital pun masih tetap sah. Next, tata cara pendaftaran website Kemilen. Bapak Ibu silakan masuk ke iocs.kemlu.go.id ke laman registrasi. Kalau Bapak sudah punya akun, Bapak Ibu sudah punya akun, silakan langsung sign in. Kalau belum, Bapak silakan register dulu, memasukkan nomor email. Nah, kalau nanti email sudah dimasukkan, secara kita akan menerima email notifikasi untuk mengaktifkan akun. Next slide. Bapak aktifkan dan Bapak akan dibawa ke laman berikutnya untuk pendaftaran. Next slide please. Jadi Bapak isi username, password yang sudah Bapak daftarkan. Nah, kemudian langsung masuk ke next slide. Bapak akan masuk ke laman ini. Silahkan Bapak Ibu klik. Kalau memang Bapak Ibu untuk membuat baru, silahkan klik apply. Kalau sudah ada mau perpanjang, renew. Atau kalau Bapak Ibu ada pindah lokasi atau ada perubahan data, silakan ngeklik update. Next slide. Nah, di sini nanti Bapak Ibu akan terus diarahkan akan ada petunjuk mengenai apa saja syarat-syarat, apa saja yang harus diupload dan lain sebagainya. Semuanya jelas ada di website ini. Next slide. Ini terlalu lama kalau kita bahas satu-satu. Jadi prinsipnya semua sudah ada di sini seperti halnya Bapak Ibu mengisi banyak hal lah, kita sudah terbiasa menggunakan apply segala sesuatu melalui internet ini. Apa saja dokumen wajib persyaratan pengajuan Kemilen? Yang pertama, kalau untuk WNI, syarat utamanya adalah dia punya kopi paspor dan ada izin tinggal di luar negeri. Kemudian bagi WNA, nanti ada persyaratan-persyaratan lainnya Pak yang memang perlu diupload. Silahkan dicek pada saat Bapak Ibu mendaftar itu ada semua petunjuknya di internet itu Pak. Kemudian untuk WNA anak ex WNI atau WNA anak ex WNI atau WNA anak WNI, kopi paspor, izin tinggal dan akta kelahiran. Kenapa kita perlu akta kelahiran? Ini salah satu yang untuk membuktikan bahwasanya memang Bapak atau Ibu itu punya keluarga atau punya ayah, punya ibu yang warga negara Indonesia. Jadi kalau cuma ada kopi paspor dan izin tinggal saja, kami dari admin tidak sulit untuk memverifikasinya.
Maaf, 3 menit Pak. Terima kasih.
Siap. Nah, Kemilen itu bisa dicabut. Yang pertama kalau orangnya meninggal dunia. Kedua, pemegang meninggal dunia. Kedua, pemegangnya meninggalkan kembali ke Indonesia. Ketiga, diketahui menggunakan dokumen palsu. Keempat, melakukan tindak-tindak kejahatan atau merugikan pemerintah Republik Indonesia. Next slide. Ini silakan Bapak Ibu, nanti kami bisa share slide ini. Kalau Bapak Ibu ingin mengetahui lebih jauh mengenai Kemilen, silakan bisa email kami langsung atau klik di FAQ-nya, ada semua di website ini. Next slide. Alur kerja Kemilen itu adalah yang pertama, Bapak Ibu mengajukan ke perwakilan RI, nanti perwakilan RI akan melakukan verifikasi. Setelah semuanya dianggap lolos, verifikasinya akan dikirim ke Kemlu, ke tempat saya, Pak. Bapak Ibu, kemudian dari situ kita juga akan melakukan double verification. Kalau sudah disetujui, langsung akan kita kirim Kemilennya melalui email. Next slide. Nah, ini data Kemilen yang sampai ini seminggu yang lalu. Dari total aplikan masuk ada 2017 aplikan yang sudah diterbitkan, saat ini ada 1044 dengan rincian sebagai berikut. Aplikasi ditolak ada 314. Biasanya penolakan itu karena data yang disampaikan tidak valid atau pas foto yang tidak memenuhi standar. Biasanya misalkan ambil fotonya melalui selfie dengan background yang nggak jelas dan lain sebagainya, itu sering menjadi salah satu alasan penolakan. Next slide. Jadi Bapak Ibu, kalau kita paham ini saya masukkan gambar Facebook, Twitter, dan lain sebagainya, Instagram, dan lain sebagainya. Selama ini kita sangat mudah sekali memberikan data-data pribadi kita kepada website sosial media seperti ini. Nah, untuk itu saya juga berharap Bapak Ibu mau memberikan data Bapak Ibu, next slide, dan subscribe untuk mendaftar untuk mengajukan Kemilen. Jadi Pak Heru dan Bapak Ibu sekalian, sebagai informasi tadi sudah saya sampaikan, saya baru 6 bulan, efektifnya 1-2 bulan dengan dipotong work from home karena COVID. Gini Bapak Ibu, jadi kami melihat seperti yang saya sampaikan tadi, pertanyaannya itu apa manfaat dari Kemilen buat para diaspora. Nah, saya coba membalik pertanyaan itu Bapak Ibu. Pada saat saya berbicara dengan counterpart saya, jadi cita-cita ke depan saya adalah saya akan berusaha mencarikan insentif-insentif lainnya untuk para diaspora Indonesia. Itu salah satu target kerjaan saya di diplomasi publik. Namun pada saat saya misalkan saya bicara dengan imigrasi, Bapak imigrasi, kami mau para diaspora diberikan insentif. Kemudian imigrasi nanya ke saya, berapa sih data diaspora Indonesia? Data yang paling valid, yang paling sah adalah Kemilen ini. Karena kalau orang bilang datanya 6 juta, itu bisa bilang hearsay ya. Memang mungkin orangnya ada, tapi secara fisik kami tidak memiliki datanya. Jadi pada saat saya bilang ke imigrasi, Pak imigrasi datanya, Pak Yusron datanya berapa? Ada 1000 doang Pak. Ya imigrasi bisa ketawa Pak sama saya Bapak Ibu. Ngapain kita capek-capek ngurusin 1000 orang doang gitu loh. Nah maka dari itu saya punya satu program, ya kita perbanyak jumlah diaspora, jumlah Kemilen sebagai bukti bahwasannya memang masyarakat Indonesia di luar negeri itu banyak. Sehingga kalau jumlahnya banyak, secara otomatis menurut saya, ini logika sederhana saya saja, akan meningkatkan nilai tawar, nilai jual. Mohon maaf, bukan kita jualan, tapi nilai jual para diaspora yang ada di luar negeri. Seperti halnya sebelumnya saya tugas di Malaysia, Bapak Ibu. Saya selalu bilang jumlah WNI di Malaysia itu konon kabarnya ada 3 juta, 4 juta. Tetapi data resmi yang saya punya dari imigrasi Malaysia itu ada 700.000. Dan 700.000 itu seksi Bapak Ibu untuk para anggota DPR berebut untuk ngisi di Dapil 2. Nah jadi harapannya kalau jumlah Kemilen itu ada banyak, ya secara otomatis saya yakin bukan hanya anggota DPR, semua instansi pemerintah pun akan lebih akan lebih memperhatikan. Karena sekali lagi Kemilen is the only data that we have on diaspora, selain mungkin lapor diri dan lain sebagainya itu tadi. Tapi memang secara undang-undang adalah Kemilen ini. Demikian Bapak Ibu, please subscribe to Kemilen. Terima kasih. Billahi taufiq
Terima
wal
kasih.
hidayah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih banyak Bapak Yusron untuk penjelasannya, sangat jelas buat kita semua. Pentingnya kemilan ya Pak. Baik, sekarang
Siap.
kita lanjutkan. Untuk yang kedua, pembicara kita adalah Bapak Denny Ridwan, Direktur Surat Utang Negara, Ditjen Pengelolaan Pembiayaan dan Risiko Kementerian Keuangan Republik Indonesia. Silakan Bapak Denny Ridwan.
Terima kasih Mbak Imelda Budiman. Selamat malam Pak Yusron Ambari, Direktur Diplomasi Publik Kementerian Luar Negeri. Ini untuk sekian kalinya kita berada satu panggung, sama-sama kita promosikan jualan kita masing-masing Pak Yusron. Mudah-mudahan malam ini mendapat sambutan yang cukup baik dari para diaspora. Juga kepada Pak Heri Utomo, Presiden IDN United, terima kasih sudah mengundang kami untuk bisa bersilaturahmi dan memperkenalkan Diaspora Bond kepada teman-teman diaspora, dan juga kepada Jay Benson, thank you, I are waiting for your input regarding our plan. Jadi pada malam ini Bapak Ibu semua, izinkan kami untuk sedikit sharing tentang Diaspora Bond, rencana yang sedang kita bangun di Kementerian Keuangan. Dan sebelum masuk ke dalam pembahasan Diaspora Bond, pada malam hari ini kami juga akan memperkenalkan dulu apa itu surat berharga negara, karena Diaspora Bond ini merupakan bagian dari surat berharga negara, dan nanti kita baru bicara secara teknis mengenai rencana penerbitan Diaspora Bonds. Nah, bicara mengenai surat berharga negara, berdasarkan undang-undang tentang surat utang negara, ada beberapa tujuan. Pertama, terkait untuk membiayai defisit APBN. Nah, ini dalam kondisi tekanan di pandemi COVID sekarang ini, hampir semua negara di dunia mengalami masalah yang sama, di mana penerimaan negara mengalami tekanan penurunan karena adanya pembatasan kegiatan ekonomi, sementara di sisi belanja meningkat untuk bisa menangani permasalahan yang disebabkan oleh COVID-19 ini. Sama halnya dan di Indonesia, ketika penerimaan pajak menurun, karena kita memang ada penurunan dari kegiatan ekonomi dan juga ada insentif pajak yang diberikan, sehingga penerimaan pajak menurun, tetapi di sisi belanja meningkat untuk penanganan sisi kesehatan, untuk menyediakan social safety net bagi masyarakat yang rentan, dan juga untuk mendukung dunia usaha, terutama untuk UMKM. Nah, sehingga karena penerimaan jauh lebih kecil daripada belanja, terjadi defisit. Nah, salah tujuan dari penerbitan surat utang negara adalah untuk membiayai defisit. Selain tentu adalah untuk mengelola cash flow-nya pemerintah, dan juga mengelola surat utang supaya kita bisa mendapatkan biaya yang paling efektif dan juga menjaga sustainabilitas dari utang kita. Nah, dari tujuan itu kita bisa melihat pemanfaatnya selain sebagai instrumen fiskal, sebetulnya SBN ini juga dipergunakan oleh Bank Indonesia atau Central Bank sebagai alat untuk mengelola moneter, sebagai instrumen moneter. Jadi misalnya dalam hal seperti sekarang ini, kita butuh untuk penambahan likuiditas di pasar, maka Bank Sentral akan melakukan kebijakan untuk menambah jumlah uang beredar melalui pembelian surat berharga negara, baik yang di pasar perdana maupun yang di pasar sekunder, sehingga jumlah uang beredar. Nah, sebaliknya nanti apabila dinilai jumlah uang beredar terlalu banyak, yang dikhawatirkan menimbulkan inflasi yang tidak terkendali, maka Bank Sentral bisa menyerap kelebihan likuiditas tersebut dengan menjual surat berharga yang dimilikinya, SUN yang dimilikinya di pasar, dan menarik kelebihan likuiditas. Sementara juga ini bisa dipakai juga SUN ini oleh para pengusaha, terutama korporasi, dalam rangka untuk menerbitkan corporate bond. Nah, ini sebagai benchmark, kalau yang SUN dari pemerintah yang dianggap sebagai sekuritas yang risk-free, zero risk, maka tinggal ditambahkan nanti premium untuk risiko terkait dengan korporat yang menerbitkan surat utang tersebut. Nah, dari sisi investor, tentu penerbitan SUN juga menjadi salah satu instrumen atau alternatif investasi yang aman sekaligus menguntungkan. Nanti kita bahas di belakang kenapa aman dan menguntungkan. Nah, dari sisi klasifikasinya, di Indonesia saat ini kita mengenal ada 2 macam surat utang, yaitu yang pertama yang konvensional, yaitu surat utang negara, dan yang kedua adalah yang berdasarkan syariah Islam, yaitu SBSN, surat berharga syariah negara, atau dikenal sebagai sukuk. Nah, itu hampir sama nanti anatominya, di mana ada yang jangka pendek seperti surat berbendaran kas negara, dan ada yang jangka panjang yaitu obligasi negara. Nah, ini nanti lihat juga dari sisi mata uangnya, ada yang mata uang rupiah dan juga yang mata uang valuta asing. Untuk valuta asing kita saat ini baru ada 3 yang kita miliki, yaitu yang mata uang USD, dolar, euro, dan Jepang yen. Sementara untuk yang retail, untuk rupiah kita ada yang obligasi yang biasa dan ada yang retail. Untuk yang retail kita punya yang variable rate dan ada juga fixed rate. Nah, untuk yang variable rate kita punya SBR, saving bond retail, sementara untuk yang fixed rate kita memiliki obligasi negara retail. Nah, ini masing-masing punya karakteristik yang berbeda. Misalnya untuk yang SBR ini biasanya jangka waktunya 2 tahun, tidak bisa diperdagangkan, belikan, sehingga ini sebetulnya mirip seperti deposito dengan jangka waktu 2 tahun. Suku bunganya variabel, nanti acuannya adalah suku bunga Bank Indonesia. Jadi apabila suku Bank Indonesia naik, maka pemilik SBR bisa mendapatkan kesempatan untuk bisa menikmati suku bunga yang lebih tinggi. Tapi kalau rendah, nah kalau turun, nanti untuk SBR ini ada floor-nya. Jadi kita sebut sebagai floating with floor. Jadi kalau naik dia bisa naik, tapi kalau turun ada dibatasi pada titik tertentu, yaitu sama dengan pada nilai penerbitan. Misalnya SBR yang kita terbitkan pada beberapa bulan yang lalu, sekitar bulan Februari, nah itu di suku bunganya 6,3%. Nah, jika suku bunga Bank Indonesia naik, dia bisa ikut naik, tapi kalau turun, itu akan tetap dipatok di 6,3. Nah, sebaliknya kalau untuk yang ORI, ini fixed rate, di awal sudah ditetapkan dan akan berlaku selama 3 tahun. Jadi kemarin ketika kita menetapkan, jadi sekarang ini Bapak Ibu semua, kita sedang menawarkan ORI, dari mulai tanggal 15 Juni sampai tanggal 9 Juli, bunganya kita patok di 6,4%. Nah, ini fixed rate, tapi keuntungannya adalah bisa diperjualbelikan di secondary market. Nah, jadi kalau misalnya butuh likuiditas, ini bisa dijual di secondary market, dan ada kesempatan untuk bisa mendapatkan juga capital gain, yaitu harga jual yang lebih tinggi dibandingkan harga beli. Itu kemungkinan salah satu keuntungan apabila kita berinvestasi di ORI. Nah, kalau kita melihat profil di next slide-nya, profil dari SBN yang sekarang sudah beredar, kita lihat jumlah dari persentase dari SBN yang sukuk, yang syariah, semakin lama semakin meningkat. Untuk tahun 2019 itu sampai 30%, dan sisanya 71% adalah yang konvensional. Jumlahnya sekitar 640 triliun untuk yang konvensional, sementara untuk yang sukuk sekitar 258 triliun. Nah, untuk yang 2020, ya ini posisi per Mei, kalau nggak salah, hampir sama presentasinya, yang untuk yang sukuk sudah 32%, dan untuk yang SBN 68%. Sementara kalau kita lihat dari sisi currency-nya, 73% ini masih di dalam mata uang rupiah, dan yang kedua yang paling besar adalah dari mata uang USD 21%, berikutnya adalah euro dan Japanese yen. Sementara kalau kita lihat dari struktur kepemilikannya, saat ini kepemilikan dari investor asing terhadap SBN kita sebesar 30%, dan sisanya dari investor lokal kebanyakan dimiliki oleh bank dan lembaga keuangan selain bank seperti asuransi dan dana pensiun. Berikutnya, kalau kita lihat dari obligasi retail, tadi saya sampaikan ada 2 yang kita miliki, yaitu ORI dan SBR. Nah, kita untuk yang ORI ini sudah menerbitkan sejak tahun 2006, sementara untuk SBR sebagai adiknya ini baru tahun 2014. Jumlah penerbitan tertinggi pernah di tahun 2015 kita mendapatkan 27 triliun dalam sekali penerbitan, dan yang paling rendah di tahun 2008 ini zamannya Global Financial Crisis sekitar 2,7. Sementara kupon tertinggi kita pernah memberikan sampai 12,05%, 12,05%, sementara kupon terendahnya 5,85%. Sedangkan jumlah investor yang paling tinggi di tahun 2015 sebanyak 45.000 investor yang terlibat dalam satu kali penerbitan, sementara paling rendah di tahun 2007 hanya sebesar 12.000 investor. Nah, jadi dari dua macam obligasi retail yang saat ini kita miliki, yaitu ORI dan SBR, kita mencoba untuk menambah instrumen baru, yaitu diaspora bond, yang mana nanti kita mencoba untuk membangun suatu struktur atau suatu fitur yang beda dengan yang sudah ada. Nah, diaspora bond ini manfaatnya untuk pemerintah sebetulnya tadi selain sebagai sumber pembiayaan, terutama dalam menangani kebutuhan pembiayaan APBN seperti saat ini. Jadi oleh World Bank sudah diprediksi bahwa pandemi COVID-19 ini akan membuat penerbitan diaspora bond semakin meningkat karena berbagai negara tentu akan memiliki kebutuhan pembiayaan yang lebih tinggi. Nah, salah satu caranya untuk bisa mendapatkan harga yang lebih murah adalah dengan menerbitkan diaspora bonds. Karena salah satu yang menarik dari diaspora bond ini, di beberapa negara dia bisa untuk menerbitkan diaspora bond dengan imbal hasil atau suku bunga yang lebih rendah dibandingkan dengan harga pasar. Makanya ini disebut juga sebagai patriotic bond, di mana ini menunjukkan patriotisme dari para diaspora untuk bisa membantu pembiayaan di negara masing-masing, walaupun dengan suku bunga yang lebih rendah dibandingkan dengan kalau dia berinvestasi di tempat lain. Nah, sementara bagi diaspora, tentu ada instrumen ini bisa memberikan peluang untuk berinvestasi, juga berpartisipasi di dalam pembangunan. Nah, kita lihat juga di Indonesia, kalau kita melihat dari suku bunga obligasi retail yang selama ini kita tawarkan, di kisaran antara 6 bahkan sampai 12%, tentu ini akan menjadi suatu alternatif investasi yang menarik dibandingkan dengan misalnya kalau di beberapa negara sudah menerapkan suku bunga yang sangat rendah, bahkan ada yang sampai negatif ya. Kemarin di Jepang itu sudah bank sentralnya sudah menerapkan suku bunga negatif, dan di beberapa negara Eropa pun kalau saya tidak salah suku bunganya itu sudah di bawah 1%. Sehingga memang kalau berinvestasi di obligasi negara retail, ini tentu bisa memberikan alternatif investasi yang juga lebih menguntungkan dibandingkan dengan inflasi di negara masing-masing. Nah, mengenai target investor, ini tadi sudah disampaikan juga oleh Pak Yusron. Jadi pada bulan Januari 2020 sudah ditandatangani nota kesepahaman antara Menteri Keuangan dan Menteri Luar Negeri untuk bekerjasama dalam penerbitan diaspora bond ini akan menggunakan KMILN. Nah, ini KMILN ini akan kita pergunakan untuk bisa mengidentifikasi siapa-siapa saja yang eligible untuk bisa membeli diaspora bonds. Untuk WNI, sebetulnya tadi kalau yang ORI ataupun yang SBR, saat sekarang pun kalau masih statusnya masih WNI bisa melakukan investasi. Tapi kalau misalnya ingin berinvestasi di diaspora, nanti untuk yang WNI pun tetap harus memiliki KMILN. Ini tujuannya supaya kami bisa, atau sistem kita bisa mudah untuk mengidentifikasi apakah WNI yang mengajukan tersebut adalah benar-benar tinggal di luar negeri atau sebetulnya tinggal di Indonesia. Sementara untuk yang WNA, ya.
3 menit, Pak. Terima kasih.
Baik. Untuk yang WNA tidak ada alternatif lain selain menggunakan KMILN. Nah, mengenai langsung ke fitur produk diaspora bond di slide 12, ini fitur yang saat ini sedang kita coba bangun. Pertama, penerbitan dalam mata uang rupiah. Kenapa demikian? Karena sejak tahun 2018, penerbitan obligasi retail itu sudah sepenuhnya secara online. Kita menggunakan ISBN. Nah, ISBN ini kita untuk pembayaran bunga maupun pembayaran pokoknya nanti itu menggunakan bank persepsi yang merupakan bank nasional. Jadi mau tidak mau nanti Bapak Ibu yang tertarik untuk investasi di diaspora bonds harus memiliki rekening di bank nasional. Karena nanti akan kita bayar melalui dengan mata uang rupiah. Sementara untuk fiturnya kita propose supaya berbeda dengan yang sudah ada, tenornya 3 tahun, kemudian fixed rate, non-tradable, tanpa early redemptions, dan minimal pemesanan 5 juta dan maksimal 5 miliar. Nah, ini berbeda dengan yang ORI yang saat ini sedang ditawarkan di tanah air, minimal pemesanan hanya 1 juta rupiah dan maksimalnya 3 miliar. Ini produk atau fitur yang sedang kita coba bangun. Kemarin kami minta masukan juga dari para diaspora, apakah memang fitur ini cukup menarik, atau kita coba harus melakukan penyesuaian supaya lebih menarik bagi para diaspora untuk mau berinvestasi di diaspora bonds. Nah, untuk cara pemesanannya hampir sama sebetulnya kalau Bapak Ibu semua sudah terbiasa dengan melakukan transaksi di marketplace, itu hampir sama. Nanti ke detailnya bisa kita jelaskan di kemudian hari, mulai proses registrasi, pemesanan, pembayaran maupun konfirmasi. Nah, sebagai informasi, kalau untuk registrasi mungkin masih ada proses yang harus dilakukan secara manual, yaitu untuk yang pemilihan atau untuk yang belum punya rekening mungkin harus cek rekening dulu. Tapi kalau sudah punya itu, maka proses lainnya bisa dilakukan secara online. Nah, kita sudah bekerja sama dengan beberapa pilot yang akan menerbitkan diaspora bond ini. Ada 8 bank, kemudian ada 3 perusahaan fintech company, dan ada 3 perusahaan sekuritas yang akan membantu kita dalam penjualan diaspora bonds. Yang menjadi isu selama ini adalah masalah pajak. Jadi nanti ada dua kondisi tergantung daripada diaspora ini, apakah sebagai subjek pajak dalam negeri atau subjek pajak luar negeri. Kalau subjek pajak dalam negeri dikenakan pajak final, PPh final sebesar 15%, tapi kalau subjek pajak luar negeri sebesar 20%, atau sesuai dengan tax treaty antar negara. Seperti kemarin kita di Belanda, ternyata di Belanda kesepakatannya ada sebesar 10%. Jadi untuk diaspora bonds yang menjadi subjek pajak luar negeri di Belanda, itu akan dikenakan pajak sebesar 10% saja, lebih rendah dibandingkan yang di dalam negeri. Hal lain mungkin terakhir mengenai peraturan jurisdiksi, ini yang kita juga minta masukan dari para pakar, terutama yang memahami hukum di negara masing-masing, bagaimana proses untuk kita bisa melakukan penawaran promosi dari diaspora bond ini. Karena secara teknis sebetulnya kita menggunakan platform ISBN yang ada di dalam negeri, jadi tunduk di hukum di Indonesia, tapi terkait dengan penawaran atau marketing, ini tentu kita harus melihat aturan di negara masing-masing. Ini kita akan berpengaruh pada apa kita akan melakukan marketing secara aktif di setiap jurisdiksi yang Bapak Ibu tinggal, atau kita akan melakukan marketing secara pasif. Tentu dua-duanya ada pro kontra. Ini yang sedang kita hitung, mana yang paling memungkinkan dilakukan di tiap negara, apakah kita bisa melakukan marketing secara aktif langsung di tempat itu, atau kita melakukan marketing secara pasif. Mungkin sementara itu Mbak Imelda yang bisa saya sampaikan, nanti kalau ada pertanyaan kita bisa elaborasi lebih lanjut di dalam Q&A session. Terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Ya, terima kasih banyak Pak Denny Ridwan. Kita sudah jelas ya tentang diaspora bond. Terima kasih banyak. Lalu sekarang kita lanjutkan. Now we continue with our third speaker, Mr. Jay Benson. He is a diaspora bond expert from Denver, Colorado. Okay, Mr. Jay, go ahead.
All right, great. Let me just share my screen here real quick. Can you see the presentation there? Oh,
I haven't. Oh, yes. Oh,
there. Good. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, hello, and thank you all very much for having me here today. Very excited to have the opportunity to discuss a topic which I find extremely interesting in diaspora investment. My name is Jay Benson, and I work for a nonprofit research organization called One Earth Future Foundation that focuses on issues of conflict, governance, and development around the globe. So I'm here to talk a little bit about the empirical literature on diaspora investment, as well as some of the research we've done in that area, as well as speaking about diaspora bonds more specifically. I hope that it can be a useful contribution to the larger conversation that we're having here today. So I'll start with just a little bit of context on the role of diaspora investment more broadly. Our research in this area indicates that diaspora investors have the potential to be a critical source of investment capital in economies really around the globe. Diaspora investment can take a variety of forms, including diaspora bonds, diaspora targeted mutual funds, and several others. But really, in any case, diaspora investment has the potential to be a particularly important in economies with a few different characteristics. Those include economies with limited domestic savings base and capital formation, economies which international capital has deemed excessively risky, as well as economies with high rates of foreign debt ownership, which creates the risk of potential sudden capital flight. And while the former two characteristics do not particularly apply to the Indonesian economy, it's a large economy with a relatively high domestic savings rate and is appealing to international investors. The third does. My understanding is that Indonesia has a fairly large proportion of foreign debt ownership, making it potentially vulnerable to foreign capital flight. In this context, diaspora investors can be particularly important as they often are less likely to react with the same kind of volatility in times of uncertainty, providing a more stable source of capital for development. So, however, in order to successfully attract diaspora investors, states need to understand the unique combination of motivations that drive diaspora investors and distinguish them from other potential sources of capital. Our research has shown that diaspora investors have a unique set of investment motives when placing capital in their countries of origin, which need to be taken into account when developing investment vehicles which are targeting them. These include financial return. So obviously with any investor, diaspora investors want to know that their investments are relatively safe and that they'll see a financial return. Diaspora investment is not simply philanthropy by another name. However, what often distinguishes diaspora investors is the unique combination of other motivations that drive their decisions to invest in their country of origin. These non-financial motivations can include social good and welfare impacts, support for family members, political considerations, and planning for an eventual return home. Now, those last three generally are more relevant when we're talking about direct investment into individual firms for providing income streams for an eventual return or for family members or political considerations. Really, when we're talking specifically about diaspora bonds, the major non-financial motivation is social good and welfare impacts. So surveys of diaspora investors have shown that one of the primary motivations for diaspora investment in their country of origin is the desire to see their investments contribute to social welfare. They often want to know that their investment is contributing to national development and the improved livelihood of their compatriots. So catering to both of these motivations, the financial and the social good, well-being motivations, are really critical in successful diaspora bond issuances. All that said, it's also important to note that diaspora investors globally or within any given diaspora community are far from monolithic. They likely fall imperfectly along a spectrum from those who are less established in their countries of residence, less financially secure, less active investors, and more risk averse, to those who are more established, wealthier, more investment savvy, and more risk acceptant. Diaspora bonds, as one of the several potential investment vehicles available for trying to attract diaspora capital, are more likely to appeal to those members of the diaspora community who are less established in their country of residence, less financially secure, and more risk averse. So looking then at the...
Secara prinsip, Pak Riko, sebetulnya kalau dari Biro Hukum tadi sore ya, mereka inginnya sih supaya simpel, jadi sebisa mungkin semakin sedikit jadi makin simpel makin baik. Kira-kira itu sih.
Rifa, Pak Denny.
Rifa di blog ya.
Suara masuk Pak Denny.
Sorry, Jay.
No, that's okay. everything okay? Should I keep going?
Yes,
Okay.
please.
Okay, so looking then at diaspora bonds more specifically, what is their theoretical potential and what is their track record when implemented? It's important to note that diaspora bonds are not a new concept by any means. Israel and India, for example, have used diaspora bonds for extended periods, and diaspora bonds can be particularly beneficial for in two kind of cases. In the raising funds for large-scale development projects, and in contexts of urgent financial pressure from external crises. For example, diaspora bonds may be particularly beneficial for funding large-scale development projects such as infrastructure, agricultural modernization, public service provision, where long timelines and modest returns make the pooled risk, fixed terms, and stable returns of bonds appealing to investors. So how have previous diaspora bond issuances fared in the past? I thought it might be beneficial to look at two cases with some similar characteristics but very different outcomes to draw lessons about what might work. Those two cases are Ethiopia and Nigeria, both some of the largest economies in Africa, very large and well-established diaspora populations around the globe, but resulting in very different outcomes. So looking first at Nigeria, Nigeria issued its first diaspora bond in 2017, and it was a resounding success. It raised $300 million for investment in infrastructure from Nigerians overseas and was oversubscribed by 130%. Nigeria is now reportedly considering a second offering. It's important to note that these Nigerian diaspora bonds were registered with the American Securities and Exchange Commission, the UK Listing Authority, and the London Stock Exchange, and they focused exclusively on raising funds for infrastructure development. Now, Ethiopia, on the other hand, issued its first diaspora bond in 2008, but sales fell well short of expectations. A second was issued in 2011, which also appears to have struggled significantly. And these were not registered with the SEC or any other kind of regulatory body, and that limited their marketability and actually led to the forced repayment of $6.5 million sold in the US for violating American security laws. So, success is definitely not guaranteed. So given these examples and other observed cases, what appear to be some of the most salient factors that contribute to potential success of diaspora bonds? A few key factors are probably worth highlighting. The first is information and marketing. So issuing states need to have a strong understanding of where diaspora communities reside, their numbers, their investment preferences, and need to have the ability to communicate potential investment opportunities to them. Diaspora associations such as IDN can be a key source of information for governments in this regard. In line with that, one of the most impactful and relatively simple steps issuing states can take to facilitate increased investment from their diaspora is to establish an official entity to engage with them. Having an institutional home for efforts to engage the diaspora financially allows for greater outreach, which increases diaspora members' sense that they have a stake in the development of their country of origin, and perhaps helps overcome some of the information gaps which sometimes restrict the diaspora community's ability and desire to invest. The second that we'd highlight are clear links to development. As previously mentioned, while diaspora members may be willing to invest in bonds that contribute exclusively to the balance of payments, particularly in times of national crisis, in most cases, a strong link between bond issuance and development outcomes provides more opportunity to tap into diaspora investors' non-financial motivations. This can take the form of linking funds raised through diaspora bonds in whole or in part to funding national education and healthcare systems, infrastructure development, or small and medium enterprise financing, which can help motivate diaspora investors who seek to see their investment contribute to the increased socioeconomic well-being of their compatriots. Then getting into some of the more technical aspects, bond structure diversity is potentially very important. More options regarding bond maturity, fixed versus floating rates, frequency of interest payments, and minimum purchases may make such issuances more appealing to a wide spectrum of the diverse diaspora communities out there. In particular, low minimum purchase requirements may be quite important, especially for those less financially established members of the diaspora community. Another may be built-in liquidity. So this is probably more of a concern for more turbulent economies, but may also be something to consider for more stable economies like Indonesia. Measures such as allowing for early redemption of funds, if used for alternative in-country investment, may help overcome investor concerns over liquidity while keeping investment capital in country. And then finally, I just mentioned currency stability as a potential factor. Again, this is probably more of a consideration in countries with more currency instability, but where those currency instability concerns exist, allowing for purchase and repayment in a stable convertible currency may help mitigate diaspora investors' concerns over currency stability issues. Now, none of these are obviously, none of these are a single factor which constitutes an easy fix for guaranteeing diaspora bond success by any means. They're all simply factors which need to be considered in combination and which our research indicates may help to contribute to increased likelihood of bond issuance success. So thank you very much for your time today. If you're interested in learning more about our research on this topic, please feel free to visit our website or reach out to me directly. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear how this research might conform or conflict with your own experiences and get that feedback. So I hope this can serve as an interesting contribution to the conversation. Obviously, I'm very interested in learning more about the specific Indonesian context from the questions and the remainder of the presenters. So thank you very much for your time today.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Jay Benson, for the presentation. Excellent. Next, last but not least, silakan kepada Bapak Heri Utomo, President of IDN United. Silakan Pak Heri.
Terima kasih Pak Denny, terima kasih Pak Yusron atas waktunya. Jay, thank you for excellent presentations. I think we learned a lot from you. So to make Jay feels more comfortable and doesn't feel to be singled out, I'm presenting my following presentation in English. So here you go, Jay. So hopefully we'll get you a little better feeling there. From Baton Rouge, Louisiana, good afternoon or good morning to our audience in the States. Good evening to our diaspora in Indonesia and other Asian countries. And also good afternoon to our diaspora in Europe. For the audience who do not know me, I am the President of Indonesian Diaspora Network United, the worldwide Indonesian diaspora organization, and I'm also a professor at the Louisiana State University here in the US. My title of presentation is Diaspora Bond, the latest survey conducted by IDN United. I will start with slide number 2. Let me give you the background information on diaspora. There are approximately between 6 to 8 million of diaspora worldwide. They are composed of 4.7 million, about half of them are Indonesian citizen, Indonesian passport holder, and about half are former citizen, either descendant, and only a small number are Indonesianists, which is friends of Indonesia that consider diaspora. Looking at where they reside, 35% are located in Malaysia, 13% in Saudi Arabia, 11% in United Emirates Arab. Therefore, more than half of diaspora population reside in this particular region. There's a lot of people there. The rest of them reside in many other countries. Here in the US, it is only about 3% of approximately 250 to 350,000 diaspora. In the Netherlands, it's slightly more than 4%. So IDEA United is ear and eye of Indonesian diaspora with 20 chapters across 4 continents. Not included in this chapter list yet is Germany. Chapter Germany is in the process of becoming the newest member. We have a headquarter office located in Jakarta at Menara Palma Building, Kuningan, and currently is being relocated somewhere else. We are in the process of moving. We have 8 departments, and each is headed by the director to accommodate various programs from education to dual citizenship, health, and culinary. Very diverse program. And these are some of the accomplishments that we achieved in several years. Among them are the media coverage, quite a bit, 500 media coverage, 20 diverse programs both in country and overseas, and also 1 global summit where the Kemlin was released for the first time. And then this is just to give you an idea, our activity across the world, both in Indonesia and also overseas. I don't want to go over this one very long because we have so many things to cover right now. And I would like to jump over to the latest online survey on diaspora bond investment conducted by IDEA United from November 2019 to February of 2020. Hopefully this will help the diaspora bond to make it its way to more common program. So this is what we had. So 147. This is online survey. So it's free. Anybody can do it. And very simple question, but very critical one. 147 participants take part in this survey. And most of them are non-Indonesian, which is Indonesian citizen, and some of them, 30%, are already non-Indonesian citizen. This is the country that we able to collect the participation from. So the majority of respondents is from the US, 40% of them, followed by Australia, 17%, and Indonesia, 11%. Only a small percentage from Canada, UK, Sweden, Belgium, Finland, France, Germany, Netherlands, Japan, Qatar, Tunisia, and Singapore. However, beside the big pocket of Indonesian diaspora in Malaysia, Saudi Arabia, and Emirates Arab, as I mentioned before, none participated in this survey. So just a little note there. When asked about Indonesian bank account, their responses are about split halfway, half and half, between have and do not have. And then in terms of personal wealth, their profile is really interesting. 41% have moderate saving, 26% have accumulated significant investment asset, excluding owning their homes. So this is good news. These are prime for a potential player in investment program. and only 12% is just started out. And looking at the financial profiling, so the annual income is also encouraging. There is a small percentage, less than 60%, that are hovering around between 30,000 to 110,000 annual income gross to about 38% above 110K. So this is potential for investment in back home in our country. And then with source of income, 66% categorized as secure. This is again good news, and 17% very secure. So regarding the investment knowledge, here's the problem that we see. Only 4.9% have a thorough knowledge about the investment. And I remember Jay said that one of the key things to be successful in this program is to give the much information as possible, simple but thorough, and to diaspora so that way they understand how this thing works. So I think this is something that Kemenkeu can work on it, and we can move from there. It can be done through many ways, from say, for example, advertisement, publication, socialization, and so on, but it has to be done often and consistently, something that need to be done this way. And then in regard to investment goal, the majority, 48%, said that they are looking for a long-term growth, less risk, and willing to accept low return. I think it's very typical. I think this is something that we can see in different countries that successfully implemented the diaspora bond. And only 11% are willing to go with more riskier approach. And in terms of their willingness to tolerate a risk, I think it's very similar trend to previous slide investment goal. And 46% said as little volatility as possible with reasonable income assured. So this is something that may be typical of that, and we have to understand that nature in order to attract more diaspora to be willing to invest in Indonesia. And then in terms of return expectation, 36% of diaspora expecting in 5 to 10 years. About 28% is looking at 10 years and more as far as long-term investment. And only 6.3 is looking for at least more than, less than 1 year. So it's only a small percentage. If we ask, when we ask if they are interested in government issue bond, 31% very interested, 35% interested, and only 10% not interested. So this is very good news. So it's just depends how we're gonna design and how we're gonna attack this problem. The strategy and so on play a big role in here. And things to consider when investing by diaspora. So this is very important factor in terms of the investment potential when we want to win the heart of diaspora. 38% said they need fair and clear procedure of investment. They want to know exactly the total fees to purchase, maintain, and sell the investment. So this is clear cut, just like what Jay said. I mean, it has to be very clear and very easy to understand, and they know the return and very, very transparent. And 38% said they need credible and competency. This is again, like Jay said, that means the investment product has to be registered with the International Security Agency. This is the key successful diaspora bond launched by several African countries that already flourish. Okay, the next one is motivation to invest in government issue bond. Is no secret in here. There is, I think this is exactly in line with what Jay said earlier. 15% sees sees it as a way of giving back to Indonesia. This is what unique about diaspora. Their willingness to help their mother country as much as they can. The majority are looking for improving overall investment gain and global diversification portfolio also. Now, I would like to close my presentation. Hopefully I can save time, Ms. Imelda. So by connecting favorable conditions that I presented and willingness of diaspora to invest while they are looking for potential social impact of their investment as a way of giving back to Indonesia. This is also critical because diaspora is well informed. If their investment have the social impact or not, they will understand. They will know exactly what is going on. So we have to kind of go along with that because this is for the good of the Indonesian itself. So to be very successful, Diaspora Bond has to consider these factors that Jane and our survey says, and IDN United will collaborate with the Indonesian government to advocate positive social impact that relate to Diaspora Bond. I mentioned earlier that we have a lot of activities in Indonesia and overseas, and I think this is a bridge to connect and to have the social impact as good as possible while investing and helping Indonesian financial condition. So I hope this subject will come out during the discussion session. And with that, I would like to end my presentation and thank you very much. Back to you, Ms. Imelda.
Thank you so much, Pak Heri. Everyone, let's give a big round of applause for everyone, all the presentation. All right, thank you so much untuk Bapak Denny Reituan, Mr. J. Benson, Bapak Yusron Ambari, dan Pak Heri. Baik, untuk selanjutnya kita akan lanjutkan dengan diskusi bersama. Kami serahkan kepada Bapak Heri Utomo. Silakan Pak Heri untuk memimpin acara diskusi bersama.
Terima kasih, Bu Imelda. I think we got 30 minutes. It's not very long, so I hope we have a very productive discussion here. So because we have so limited time, I would like to urge you question with a direct statement. So that way our speaker can answer it and we will have a very meaningful discussion there. So I will open with 3 questions first. Please, if you have question, please unmute and say your name very briefly, where you are, and then state your question very shortly. Thank you. 3 questions.
Me first?
Okay, silakan.
Yeah, my name Okta. I'm based in Vienna, Austria.
Okay.
My question is to Jay, maybe to you too. Is this program already running, or you just presenting what do you call it, like a proposal or something like that? Number 1. Number 2, if it is already running, where is the portfolio charts that I can check it out? Because I have myself, like a stock bond. So I would like to know. The 3rd question, do I have or do I need to open a bank account in Indonesia? Because my currency is euro, and how it works. Thank you.
Okay, great question. I think the question mostly goes to Pak Denny and Pak Yusron and a little bit to Jay probably. Silakan Pak Denny and Pak Yusron, and then maybe followed by Jay for that.
Okay, thank you Mbak Okta dari Vina. So the Diaspora Bonds actually is a plan. We haven't issued yet. That's why we are currently doing a survey, as Pak Yusron mentions. The survey just closed last, I think, this week. So 30 June, we have closed the survey to get input from the diaspora regarding the this project. So the planning is, our planning now, we want to issue the Diaspora Bonds November 2020, but it depends on the situation, if considered or not, because there's 2 considerations. First, whether technically we are ready to issue this bond, and secondly, we also need to know the financial condition of diaspora, because the pandemic will impact the financial condition of diaspora. So we also want to know whether they still have enough adequate money to fund in these instruments. So we don't have yet. Bu Okta is still in the plan. And then regarding the Indonesian bank account, yeah, I think Pak Heri, your survey is quite encouraging for us. The result is really relevant with our proposal, except for two issues. Based on your survey, around 40% of the respondents doesn't have Indonesian bank accounts. But in this case, as I mentioned in my presentations, one of the requirement is that you need to have Indonesian bank account, because in the current regulation and current system, we pay the interest and also the principals in rupiah through Indonesian banks. So if you want to invest in diaspora bonds, you need to open Indonesian bank account. I think that's my question from me, Pak Heri.
Ya, thank you Pak. Pak Yusron, kalau bisa nambahkan.
Thank you, Bu Okta. Like Pak Denny already stated that you have to have a bank account in Indonesia, and currently that the Kemilan is not available. I mean, it's not a good document for you to open a bank account. So I mean, still in our bank system, you need the Indonesian ID. But there are also a regulation on the foreigner who can open bank account also in Indonesia. I'm not sure about that, if that kind of account also applicable to buy a diaspora bond as well. Maybe Pak Denny can answer to that. So I guess that is my answer, Pak Heri. Thank you very much.
Terima kasih Pak Yusron. Jay, if you could have your comment on that.
No, I don't think I have much that I can offer there. My research is really on past diaspora bonds.
Okay.
So the specifics of this one is something I would defer to anyone else on.
Okay, great. All right, next question.
Yes, I have. Oh.
Okay, either Beda, Pak Riko?
Ya.
Go ahead, Pak Riko.
Pak Riko duluan.
Terima kasih. Saya Riko Barata dari Carrollton, Texas. Saya melihat diaspora bond tanpa mengurangi rasa hormat orang yang bercita-cita membantu perekonomian Indonesia dengan cara membeli diaspora bond, tapi diaspora bond pada umumnya merupakan suatu isu ekonomi, masalah untung dan rugi, seperti itu. Saya ajukan pertanyaan ke Pak Yusron dari Direktur Diplomasi Publik Kemlu RI, apa usaha Kemlu untuk memberikan benefit untuk menjadi daya tarik bagi seperti saya, diaspora Indonesia yang sudah menjadi US citizen, untuk berpartisipasi dalam program ini? Sesuai tentu Bapak pernah bilang bicara dengan Dirjen Imigrasi, tapi kan ada saya udah dengar isu ini dari 10 tahun yang lalu, tapi karena saya lihat tidak ada hal yang menguntungkan bagi anggota DPR dan orang yang di sana pada umumnya, isu ini hanya mandek aja, tidak pernah berkembang lagi. Apa usaha dari Kemlu sesuai dengan wewenangnya untuk mendorong isu ini dibawa ke DPR agar salah satu tujuan utama kewarganegaraan dapat segera diadakan, dan itu menjadi suatu, saya pikir itu salah satu daya tarik diaspora Indonesia untuk menanamkan investasinya di Indonesia. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih Pak Rito. Pak Yusron, barangkali pertanyaan langsung ke Bapak. Saya kira ini long term plan ya. Silakan Pak Yusron.
Terima kasih Pak Riko, ya Pak Heru sudah sampaikan, Pak Heri tadi sudah sampaikan. apa yang akan dilakukan oleh Kemlu. Sebagaimana tadi paparan saya baru
Pak Yusron, kalau tadi bahasa Inggrisnya bagus tuh, kalau dijawab bahasa Inggris gimana? Supaya everybody knows. Silakan Pak, tadi bagus. Excellent English of yours. Please.
Apa for the benefit being at the Indonesian diaspora? I mean, this is not a one-shot effort, I guess. I mean, we need like if we heard about the issue of the dual citizenship for the Indonesian kids who has foreign parents, I guess the process took so long, more than 10 years, 20 years, until the government gave them the citizenship, a limited dual citizenship for the kids. I mean, this is also, I guess, the case in diaspora. Like I already stated that this is something like both sides. I mean, help us to help you. I mean, if the number is so limited, is so small, how can we in Kementerian Luar Negeri can assure other ministry? I mean, the effort that we are trying is we have to approach all the ministers, like we know in Indonesia, every ministry has their authorities. I mean, Kemlu alone cannot do that. I mean, we have to speak to other ministries as well. Like, I mean, right now, the Ministry of Finance accept our offer. So they plan to issue a diaspora bond. Perhaps, I mean, I'm not promising anything, but this is the way that I work. I see the case that the number is small, and I think the way that we can promote this by increasing the number. So when the number increase, we have the position, I mean, nilai tawar yang very good to other people. So our plan in Kemlu is we are going to approach many institutions as much, so we can ask them to give any benefit for the diaspora. I mean, I was also involved in the beginning of the declaration of this diaspora, and I really understand what the diaspora needs. But once again, Kemlu is not the only institution in Indonesia, and currently the regulation only appointed Kementerian Luar Negeri as the single organization that take care of the diaspora. So perhaps the process is not a one-time shot. It may take years to accomplish what we've been dreaming of, I guess. So there are no promise from me, but the way I work is that I see the problem and I try to solve it, and I need your help to do that. I mean, we have to, like, I already approached Harry also, and then the other diaspora IDN Global, IDN United, and we can work together. That's what I can promise you, Pak Rico. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Yusron. And next one, Bu Ida.
Thank you. I think I'm going to ask this just in a way. So if Jay feel like he would answer it, or Pak Yusron or Pak Denny would answer it. My question is, we're talking about diaspora bond. Now, I don't know if you mean over here, but I guess when you say diaspora, that means that Indonesian who are living abroad, or Indonesian who are not anymore of Indonesian citizen. So that means in my case, for example, I'm a US citizen, but I am an Indonesian descent. So I want to do something. So the question is, for this diaspora bond, how do you make sure that someone like myself and other country citizen who were Indonesian citizen before feel that whatever they're going to put in this diaspora bond is something not just secure in financially sound, but also secure in a sense that they are doing the right thing? I guess Jay probably understand what I'm saying. If I put money somewhere else, and then the US or Uncle Sam is not going to chase me because, you know, hey, where do you put the money and what is the institutional of it? So that's the first question. Now, the second question is maybe more toward Pak Yusron about the Kemlin. the way that we feel, I think I spoke with many of Indonesian who are not anymore WNI. We feel just like this Kemelin is just like the way of the Indonesian government getting the data of those who are not anymore Indonesian. And giving out data is not just simply giving out your personal data, but as well, you know, could be also seen as giving out any other information about the country where you are now the citizen. And I don't think that's an easy thing to do or the safest way to do it. So as much as we want to help, if Kemelin doesn't have certain certain safety rules for the non-WNI or non-Indonesian citizen, and maybe it's really hard to socialize it or to promote it to Indonesian who are not anymore Indonesian citizen. I hope that's pretty clear. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Jay, probably you have any comment first?
Sure. Yeah. I think there's a couple of, so I think probably the most relevant question for me was the link to how do you feel like you're contributing to something. From research that we've done, really that non-financial, more patriotic motivation comes in kind of two categories. So the first is a sense that you're contributing to a national, or really a national effort. So a lot of the historical cases of diaspora bonds have been in this category. So Israel has used diaspora bonds for a long time because it has, you know, strong historical links to its diaspora and has, you know, a contentious, obviously, relationship with neighbors in its region. So, you know, it's tapped into those kind of feelings of patriotism in its diaspora. India did a similar thing where it started issuing diaspora bonds during times of conflict with Pakistan, and so kind of tapped into nationalism in the diaspora. What I think is more probably more broadly applicable is the motivation to help individuals and communities and improve their social well-being in a country of origin. Like I said, I think linking either, you know, it doesn't have to be all funds raised from diaspora bonds, but linking a certain percentage perhaps to, you know, social good projects, infrastructure investment, investment in health, education systems, things like that. Another interesting option that we've seen happen in places that might kind of speak to your question is the use of subnational diaspora bonds. So where where diaspora members might have a very strong sense of patriotism for their country, but also for the particular province, city, region where they're from, subnational bonds are also an option that might tap even more strongly into those non-financial motivations, because diaspora members know that their investment is going to improve livelihoods in their actual communities that they originate from. So that would be a couple of things I would highlight. I hope that answers your question, but if not, I can speak to a little bit more, but I defer to anyone else who wants to address that question.
Thank you, Mr. Benson. Second question or first question may be related to Pak Denny as well and Pak Yusron. I will defer it to you, please.
Baik, terima kasih Pak Heri. Thank you for the question, Mbak Ida. So if the question is whether your investment is secure or not, we can guarantee that your investment in government debt is secure, because it's mandated in the law on government debt and in the law of state budget that the government have to honor their obligations to the bondholders. So whoever in charge, in the power, they have to honor the obligations in terms of interest payment and also the principal payment. So there is no default risk unless Indonesian as country is default, but it's less likely because we are trying to maintain our country as long as we can. And then if the question is whether the money is used in the right way, because I'm from Ministry of Finance, of course, we say that we use the money very carefully. And as we know, the Ministry of Finance, the current Minister of Finance, Ibu Sri Mulyani, is elected as the best minister for a couple of years for reasons. So in terms of managing the state budget, we are doing very credible way to doing it. But as investor, you can have your own assessment, your own judgment, whether the government, the current government, have used the budget, the taxpayer money, and also the investor money in the right way or not. But as the member of the official of the Ministry of Finance, we can guarantee you that we are doing the best possible way to invest, to use the money in the very credible way. That's what I can answer for now, Harry.
Thank you, Pak Doni. Thank you much. Pak Yusron, I think the Kemlin thing, I mean, how far along the Kemlin will be reaching out toward the non-WNI diaspora, which is a very important component, as you see in the survey, they have great potential for investment. So please comment on that. Thank you.
Okay, Pak Heri. I mean, thank you, Ibu Ida. This is like answering the question, who comes first, the egg or the chicken? I mean,
yes.
If Bu Ida doesn't want to give us her data, then how can we know who Bu Ida is? That is very, very, very difficult for us. Like I already stated that Kemilen is the only instrument that the government can have the real number of the diaspora. I mean, not just hearsay, but like the survey by IDN United, we have 8 million. But if we say, where are they? Nobody can answer that. With the Kemilen, this is the only valid data, the only instrument that we can count to have the number of diaspora. So I mean, for the secrecy of the data, I can read the ministerial decree on diaspora in chapter 6, article 11. I will read it in bahasa Indonesia. Data dan informasi Kemilen disimpan dan dijaga kerahasiaannya oleh Kementerian Luar Negeri dan Perwakilan. It means that, I mean, it's already stated that Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the embassies and our mission abroad has the responsibility to keep your information. Whatever information that you share to us, we won't share it to other parties, I mean, without your consent. Kemilen, hold on, Kemilen, no. The safety of the data, like we know, the Zoom itself, it's no safety, Pak Heri. I mean, we heard about the issue of the leaking of Zoom, all the information, you know, Facebook and everything. I mean, in this world of the internet, the safety become very the red line of safety and no safety is very, very blurred. So I guess what we are trying to keep your data as safe as possible, and then we already stated it in the ministerial decree. And I am aware also, Bu Ida, that for the non-Indonesian diaspora, currently there are the presidential decree itself didn't say a very specific issue, specific benefit of what the diaspora, for the non-Indonesian diaspora, can get the benefit of them. So, I mean, like I said earlier, that this is the process that we have to undergo. And we are going to try our best to get all the, I mean, all the benefit that you can get. But currently, perhaps like Pak Denny and Pak J also stated, but this is being nationalistic and being love of the country, of your former country that come first, and then meanwhile we can work on other issues. So this is what I can promise you. I mean, no we work together to get it done, Bu Ida. This is what I can say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pak Yusron. Certainly, we are willing to work together. Okay, I think we still have time, Mbak Emita, right? Maybe...
Ya, sekitar 7 menit.
7 menit, okay. The next 3 questions, very quick, so that we can entertain 3 questions in the last 7 minutes. Please, if I can have 3 questions.
May I kindly ask a question, Pak Heri?
Sure.
Yeah, so I wrote it down also in the chat room, but yeah, I'll mention it here.
Okay, please.
Thank you so much. My name is Pia. I'm currently in Indonesia. Thank you so much for all the presenters for very insightful presentations. I actually have a question to Jay. I'm very much interested in his point about engaging the subnational stakeholders for the diaspora bonds, since Indonesia is a very big white country, and I think it will give more good chance as well to ensure an even development. So may I kindly have your insights, Jay, taken from the experiences in other countries? What would be the enablers to achieve successful outcome of diaspora bonds at the subnational level? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Priya. Go ahead, Jay.
Yeah, so I think some of the things that contribute to success there, you know, I'll caveat by saying that a lot of the research we've done are in the use of diaspora bonds in countries affected by recent conflict. So many of diaspora members have left their countries of origin for reasons of conflict and instability. Obviously, those lessons aren't directly applicable to Indonesia. But I think that some of the things that factor into that are the size of the subnational diaspora. So I'm not familiar with, you know, I'm now familiar with some of the overall numbers and countries of residence with the Indonesian diaspora, but I don't know if there are particular regions within Indonesia which have more diaspora members. Are there certain states, are there certain provinces of Indonesia, for example, that many of those residents go to Malaysia for work, or go to, you know, go to UAE or Saudi Arabia, or is it more of a dispersed diaspora in their sub-regional origins? So I think that that's a big component that I don't have an answer to. I think also, you know, a sense of subnational bonds have often been used in times where a certain identity group might not have the best relationship with the national government. So, you know, a case like Ethiopia, I'll go back to, many people may have left the country because they had some experience of persecution with the national government. They don't want to buy national government bonds, which then go, you know, to fund their priorities. So in that instance, subnational bonds may be a more appealing option. I don't think, you know, I don't think that that's really the case in Indonesia. So that might undermine subnational bonds as a potential product in the Indonesian context. But you know, I don't have enough information about Indonesia's, you know, Indonesia's diaspora kind of demographic makeup. But I would go back to saying that it's really about the numbers and how established they are. You know, Dr. Heri's presentation did a good job of showing, you know, there's really a spectrum of how established, and I think there's, you know, one of the really positive things that you saw there is that there's a lot of people who are active investors, who have high household incomes, who have capital for, you know, for investing. So getting a better sense of where within Indonesia diaspora members are originating from and how well established they are in their countries of residence would really determine the utility of subnational bonds, I think, in the Indonesian context. I hope that answers your question.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, next question, please. I saw a question in chat, but let's see.
Pak Heri,
Oke, silakan.
tadi ada pertanyaan mengenai bagaimana mendaftar ke Milan, Pak.
Oke, silakan.
Di chatroom.
Yes,
Oke,
silakan. Yes.
Bapak ya tadi dari siapa namanya Ibu Anastasia. Nah,
Okay.
Ibu Anastasia, cara mendaftar ke Milan itu online, Bu. Jadi kalau Ibu sebagai contoh, Ibu berada di Houston, Ibu tulis di situ ada pertanyaan di mana Ibu berdomisili. Nah, Ibu akan klik Houston. Nah, nanti dari Houston itu akan ada perwakilan RI yang ada di Amerika. Misalkan Ibu akan tulis di situ tinggalnya di Amerika, di wilayah mana, akan ada pilihan perwakilan yang ada di Amerika. Ibu tinggal pilih mana yang paling dekat. Kalau Ibu tinggalnya di Texas, ya Ibu bisa pilih KJRI yang ada di Houston. Kalau Ibu tinggalnya di California, Ibu bisa pilih LA atau KJRI San Francisco. Nah, nanti mereka lah yang akan memverify data Ibu untuk kemudian dikirim ke Jakarta, and then we will do the second verification and send the Milan to you by email. Jadi dipastikan posisi Ibu Anastasia tadi ada di mana. Jadi semua informasi itu bisa Ibu cek di website Kemilan itu, Bu. Informasinya cukup jelas apa yang ada di situ, Bu. Terima kasih.
Okay.
Itu Pak Heri. Terima kasih.
Thank you, Pak Yusron. Very informative. Next one, maybe? We still have.
Di chat ada 2 pertanyaan yang belum dijawab.
Okay.
Mungkin itu dulu dari Pak Renaldo, Mas
Could you read it
Renaldo
out for
sama.
us? Could you read it out for us?
Okay, let me read it. This is from Renaldo. I have a question to Mr. J. Benson. Based on your research, do you have any advice for Indonesian government on the best method to conduct the marketing process, considering the requirement in some particular regions or countries to register, report the instrument to local financial authority? Jay?
Yeah, so I think there's probably 2 questions there. In regards to registration, we've already kind of gone over that a little bit, but yeah, making sure that they're registered as securities in major markets like the London Stock Exchange, the Securities and Exchange Commission, any other markets that might be relevant where there are substantial Indonesian diaspora populations. And then as far as marketing, I think that, national embassies are extremely beneficial in that process. And then the other one is really tapping into remittance networks. My understanding is that many of the Indonesian diaspora are working overseas in a variety of different roles, but they're sending significant remittances home. So tapping into those remittance channels, where the money order businesses they use, they're using different hawala or different remittance systems. Advertising at those actual physical locations can be a really good way of engaging with diaspora members who are already actively making financial transfers back home to family and friends. They may be a population who are very likely to then be interested in moving from sending remittances home to actually making investments in their country of origin as well.
Jay, are there any this is good take-home message? I think you have any comment on that, please?
I'm sorry.
Yes, Pak Jay, thank you for your advice, because now we are still considering whether we need to formally register, let's say in the US and the SEC or not, because we are the frequent issuers of global bonds in the US. So we don't want to undermine or to make our position in risky position if we issue diaspora bonds without any permissions or from the SEC. But on the other hand, if we officially registered in SEC, we need also to consider the cost-benefit analysis, because the cost is quite expensive, and we also need to consider whether the potential fund that we can collect from the US market is significant enough to cover the cost. That's the thing that we still think whether we need to go officially register in the majors market or not. Maybe you have any, and other question for you, Pak Jay, because in our case, we are issue the diaspora bonds in our system in Indonesian currency. So maybe we only need to get permission for marketing only. No need to register officially an SEC. What do you think?
Yeah, I'll be honest. I don't have a good answer to that question. I don't know whether that specific by doing it through Indonesian bank accounts and rupiah denominated means that it wouldn't have to be registered. I wouldn't feel comfortable answering that question, to be honest. I don't know. I'm not by any means a development economist or finance person. I'm kind of a social scientist, so I couldn't get too far into the weeds with that.
Okay, thank you, Jay. Appreciate.
Okay.
Okay.
Question, I think, right? How about the time, Miss Imelda?
Yes, possibly we have to finish, but it's 5 minutes to noon. So one more question. Buida, you found one?
Okay, one more. Last one. How about that?
No, I think the last one, since she typed it already, I think we have to respect this.
Okay, cool.
But this is an easy question. I could answer it, but I'll let Pak Yusron answer it. Okay, kartu masyarakat Kemelin, apa bedanya dengan kartu diaspora? What is the difference between Kemelin and kartu diaspora? I think I know the answer, but Pak Yusron, go ahead.
Kartu Kemilen adalah kartu masyarakat Indonesia di luar negeri. So kalau Kemilen adalah padanan kata dari diaspora. So kalau sudah kita bicara kartu masyarakat Indonesia di luar negeri ya sama dengan kartu diaspora karena dalam sistem kita harus menggunakan bahasa Indonesia dan kata diaspora itu dibahasa Indonesiakan dengan masyarakat Indonesia di luar negeri. Jadi tidak ada bedanya. Terima kasih.
Thank you. Okay, Miss Imelda, I think we can move stage.
Baik, terima kasih Bapak Ibu sekalian. Terima kasih, demikianlah acara webinar kita pada siang ini, pada malam ini dan sore ini. Kiranya apa yang telah kita dengar dan diskusikan bisa bermanfaat bagi kita semua. Kita doakan sukses untuk Diaspora Bond, and jangan lupa daftar Kemilen ya Pak Yusron. Kemilen. Alright, mungkin pertanyaan bagi banyak masyarakat, Pak, di mana presentasi ini bisa kita dapatkan untuk bisa di-share mungkin, Pak Heri?
Kita punya record, tapi nanti kita konsultasikan dengan Pak Denny.
Udah tadi Riva udah masukkan di dalam chat ini, tapi mungkin nanti
ya,
udah ada
tapi nanti
linknya.
kita konsultasikan dulu dengan Pak
Nanti
Denny.
di-share linknya.
Ya, saya kira sih kontennya oke-oke aja ya, nggak ada yang apa?
Oh ya. Ya, di-share.
Ya, di-share aja. Saya kira semakin banyak, semakin bagus. Ya.
Alright.
Imelda, I know you close it. I know you close it,
in
Imelda,
English,
but
please.
one thing for Jay, if you realize, some of us call you Pak Jay. So
Pak
you're
Jay.
officially Indonesian diaspora.
Pak J atau Pak Benson ya. Alright, thank you so much Bapak Yusron Ambari, Bapak Denny Ridwan, Mr. J. Benson, dan Pak Heri, Bu Ida. Saya Imelda Budiman on behalf of IDNU. Terima kasih banyak. Stay well everyone. Salam diaspora. Sukses.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Terima kasih semua Pak
Salam diaspora.
Pak Denny, makasih. Pak Yusron, terima kasih Pak. Thank you. See you next time. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Sama-sama Pak Heri, Pak Denny semuanya. Bye.